Mainly, we have three forms for the quadratic function. The first one called the standard form, while f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. The second form called the vertex form, which is f of x equals a times x minus h whole squared plus k. And h and k represent the vertex point. Represent the h and k represent the vertex point. The third form is X-intercept form, represented by a times x minus p times x minus q. While b and q are point on x-axis, while the function will intersect with x-axis. These are the three forms for the quadratic function. We can determine the vertex form from the standard, the vertex point from the standard equation using this rule, which is x equals negative b over 2a to find the x coordinate. After that, substitute by this value in the equation, which is f of negative b over 2a to find the value of y, which is the y coordinate. And x represent the axis of symmetry, which is x equals negative b over 2a will represent the axis of symmetry. If the coefficient of x squared has a positive sign that determine the parabola or the quadratic function should concave up. If the coordinate, if the coefficient of x squared has a negative sign, this determine that the quadratic function or the parabola should concave down. In this scenario, we have minimum point, and here we have a maximum point or maximum turning point, which is the vertex point in both of them. Okay, let's start different examples to make it clear to you. In first question, here he said what? He said if y equals x squared minus 2x plus 3, then find the values of x when y equals 2 and when y equals 18. For the first equation, I'll substitute instead of y by 2. It becomes x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals to 2. Instead of y, I'll put 2. After that, it becomes x squared minus 2x plus 3 minus 2 equals to 0. And then it becomes x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Then we're going to find two values. If we do multiplication for these two numbers, the result should be 1. If we add them, the result should be equals negative 2. Could you please help me in that, Ya'la?
1 and 1.
1 and 1.
Negative 1.
Negative 1 and 1. Completely right. Thank you. Then negative 1 and negative 1. Then while x minus 1 times x minus 1 equals 0, then x should equals 1. This is the first question. What about the second question? He said when y equals 18, then instead of y, I'll put 18. Then x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 18. It becomes x squared minus 2x plus 3 minus 18 equals 0. Then 3 and negative 18 becomes negative 15. Then x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. Think about two numbers. If the product for these two numbers should be negative 15. If we add them, the summation should be negative 2. Think about these two numbers.
Negative 5.
And
Negative 3 and 5.
3 and negative 5, completely right. Then it becomes x minus 5 times x plus 3 equals to 0. Then whether x equals 5 or x equals negative 3. Till now, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move further to some different kind of questions. Here he said what? Sketch the graph using the X-Intercepts and state the equation of the axis of symmetry. We need to determine the value of the vertex. We need to use X-Intercepts, which is Y-Intercept and X-Intercept, to graph these equations, right? And we need to determine the equation of the axis of symmetry, which is while x equals negative b over 2a. The first equation in the X-Intercept form, and that represent the values of intercepts. This equation will intercept when x equals negative 3 and when x equals 1. Then we have 2 points. And we can write this equation in the standard form. We can write it in the standard form to find the axis of symmetry. Then y equals 2. X times x becomes x squared. X times negative 1 becomes negative x. 3 times x becomes 3x. And 3 times negative 1 becomes negative 3, all times 2. Then we're going to simplify our equation. It becomes here negative x and 3x becomes 2x. Then 2 times x squared plus 2x minus 3. Then y equals 2x squared plus 4x minus 6. Till now, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. To find the axis of symmetry, which is x equals negative b over 2a, we're going to substitute instead of b by 4 and instead of a by 2. It becomes negative 4 over 2 times 2, which is 4. It becomes negative 1. This represents the axis of symmetry, which is while x equals negative 1. And we can use this concept to find the vertex point by substituting the value of x inside of the equation, or the normal function f of x or y equals 2x squared plus 4x minus 6. Then y equals 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 6. It's equals to 2 times 1 becomes 2, and here negative 4 and negative 6. Then negative 10 and 2 becomes negative 8. Then the vertex point equals to negative 1 and negative 8. What about the y-intercept? Y-intercept. Could you please help me in the y-intercept?
Is it when x equals 0?
When x equals 0, and that represents the y-intercept should equals negative 6, right? And here we have two x-intercepts, negative 3 and 1. Now it's really easy to graph this quadratic equation, because we have the x-intercepts, negative 3 and 1, and we have the y-intercept, negative 6, while x equals 0, and we have the vertex point, right? Then we're gonna graph the equation. Here we have negative 8, which is as a vertex point, okay. This one represents the x-axis and this one represents the y-axis. And we're gonna graph our quadratic equation by plotting the points, the critical points, here x and here y. Then first point should be -1 and -8, which is the vertex point, right? -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5, then -6, then -7, then -8. And here we have -1 and -2 and -3 and -4. And here we have 1 and 2 and 3. First point to plot should be -1 and -8, which is the vertex point. After that, the y-intercept, -6. After that, x-intercepts at -3 and at 1. Then we're gonna graph our quadratic equation. And because the coefficient of x squared positive should concave up, right? Simply, this is our quadratic equation. Got the idea? Is it difficult?
A bit, yes.
Okay, let's revise the main points here. First of all, we found the x-intercept from your quadratic equation here, x plus 3 and x minus 1 represent two x-intercepts, while x equals -3 and while x equals 1. Because the main equation represented by f of x equals a times x minus p times x minus q, while p and q are the x-intercepts. Got the idea?
Yeah.
Then after that, I converted this equation into the basic form or the standard form. After that, we found that the y-intercept equals to -6 because always c represent the y-intercept, which is -6. After that, using our rule, we found the axis of symmetry while x equals -1, while x equals -1 here. While x equals -1, that called the axis of symmetry. Got the idea? Is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay, let's solve another question. Let's solve another question here. Delete all of this stuff. And then we're gonna solve another question. Question B. Question B using the same method. Question B said, sketch the equation, sketch the graph using axis intercepts, and state the equation of axis of symmetry. We need to find x equals -b/2a because this is the rule for axis of symmetry, and we need to determine the axis intercepts. Here we have x minus 1 and x minus 2 that represent x-intercepts are 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
Right, Yala?
Yeah.
Okay, after that, y equals -2 times x minus 1 times x minus 2. And that equals to -2 times. Here, x times x becomes x squared. X times -2 becomes -2x. And -1 times x becomes -x. -1 times -2 becomes 2. Then we're going to simplify the expression. Here we have -2 times the expression becomes x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals to negative 2x squared plus 6x minus 4. This is f of x in the standard form. From this expression, we can find the axis of symmetry, while x equals negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a represented by negative 6 over 2 times negative 2, which is negative 4, becomes 6 over 4, becomes 3 over 2 in the simplest form. Got the idea?
Yep.
Okay. Tell me about the Y-intercept. Here we have X. What about Y-intercept? Equals to what?
Negative 4.
Yes, completely right. While x equals 0 here in this condition, but x intercepts while y equals 0. Now we found the x coordinate for the vertex point. We need to find the y coordinate for vertex form or for vertex point, which represented by y equals f of 3 over 2. Then we're gonna substitute instead of x by 3 over 2. Then calculate it, please, Yala, with me. Negative 2, 3 over 2 all squared, plus 6 times 3 over 2. Do not use your calculator, please.
Mm.
You found it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me explain it to you. Focus, please. Here we have negative 2 times 3 over 2 squared. It becomes negative 2. 3 over 2 squared becomes 9 over 4. Then plus 6 times 3 over 2, we're going to simplify it. It becomes 3 times 3 minus 4. Then it becomes negative 2 and 4. We're going to simplify it. It becomes negative 9 over 2. And here plus 9 minus 4. If we need to add or subtract the fractions, we're gonna put the denominator in the common form, right? Then we gonna do multiplication by 2 and over 2, here by 2 over 2 to find the fraction or the final fraction. Negative 9 over 2 plus 18 over 2 minus 8 over 2. Becomes negative and negative, becomes negative 17 over 2. And here we have 18 over 2 in a positive sign. Then 18 minus 17 becomes half, 1 over 2. This is the y-intercept, the y coordinate for the vertex point. Got the idea?
Yes.
Okay, then the vertex point, vertex point represented by 3 over 2 for x coordinate and half for y coordinate. After that, now we are ready to graph our sketch our graph. Now we're gonna graph it. Here we have the critical point, which is like the first point should be here the vertex 3 over 2, which is 1.5, and half 0.5 for y-axis. And here we have the y-intercept equals -4, the x-intercepts 1 and 2, and that's it. We don't need any other informations. Then we're gonna graph our equation. And focus with me, please. Here we have this coordinate plane, x-intercept, I'm sorry, x-axis and y-axis. Here x and here y. And after that, we're gonna plot the critical points, 3/2. Here we have -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. And here we have 1 and 2 and 3. Here we have -1 and -2. And here we have 1 and 2. Then the first point should be 3/2, which is 1.5, right? This is the vertex point. 1.5, which is between 1 and 2, and 0.5, which is here. This is the first point. After that, the x-intercept 1 and 2, here 1 and here 2. After that, the y-intercept -4, here should be the y-intercept -4. And the sign for the coefficient of x squared in a negative sign, and that represent what, Yala?
Which one? Negative.
The sign of the coefficient for x squared represent a negative sign. Represent that the parabola concave up or concave down?
Down.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Then let's zoom. The parabola should concave down. Then we're gonna graph it. Here the vertex passes through the x-intercept, passes through the y-intercept, right? We have the vertex point passes through the x-intercept, which is 1, and passes through the y-intercept, which is -4. And this is the second part for our parabola. Got the idea?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please solve the third question? Give a try. We need to sketch the graph using the axis intercepts, and we need to state the equation of axis of symmetry. This equation written in the vertex form. and we can put it in the X-Intercepts form. We can write it in this form, y equals half times x plus 2 times x plus 2. And that represents the quadratic formula will touch the X-intercept while x equals -2. And -2 and 0 will represent the vertex point, right? Right? And this equation should be concave up because the coefficient for x squared positive, not negative, right? Then should concave up. We have the vertex form or the vertex point. We have that the evidence that the parabola should concave up. We need to determine the y-intercept. We can find the y-intercept, right? I think it's 4, right? Y-intercept equals to 4 while x equals 0. And could you please graph this quadratic equation? Could you please graph it? X-axis and y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here 1 and 2 and 3. Here -1 and -2 and -3. Tell me about the vertex point, ya Ala.
-2, 0.
Yes, completely right. Then we're gonna plot the vertex point, -2 and 0. Tell me about the y-intercept point.
0 and 4.
0 and 4, completely right. And is there any x-intercepts except -2?
No.
Thank you. Then the axis of symmetry should equals what? Should equals -2, right?
Yeah.
Yes, this is the axis. I'm sorry about that. This is the axis of symmetry here. This is the axis of symmetry. Then we can graph our parabola. From 2 will intersect with 4, and this will be our parabola. Right?
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me solve these questions. Here he said what? Write y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3 in the form of the vertex form, in the form of x minus h over 2 plus k by completing the square. Hence, sketch y equals x squared plus 4x plus 3, stating the coordinates of the vertex, First of all, we need to convert it from this form into the vertex form by completing the square. Then y equals x squared plus 4x. In this scenario, we need to add and subtract specific value. To add and subtract half of the coefficient of x squared, which is 4 over 2 squared. 4 over 2 squared, 4 over 2 squared. We're gonna add this value and subtract the same value. Then y equals x squared plus 4x. Here, 4 over 2 becomes 2. 2 squared becomes 4. And plus 3 minus 4. This part should be together. This part should be together. Like plus 3 and -4 should be together. Then we're gonna write it in this form. The root for the first term becomes x, the sign for the second positive, the root for the second one, 2, all power 2. And here we have 3 minus 4 becomes -1, becomes -1. Now we can generate the vertex point. The vertex point should be -2 and -1. This is the vertex point, and we can determine the y-intercept from the original equation, y-intercept represented by 3, y-intercept represented by 3, while x equals 0. Now we have the vertex point, we have the y-intercept point, which is 3, and we need to what? We need to sketch the graph. Is it concave up or concave down?
Up.
Up, because?
It's positive.
Yes, the coefficient of x squared positive, not negative. Then we're gonna graph our coordinates, like here y coordinate and x coordinate. X-axis, I'm sorry, and y-axis, here x-axis and here y-axis. After that, we're gonna plot the points, determine the point here 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, here -1 and -2 and -3 and -4, and here -1 and -2 and -3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You said it's concave up, and we found the vertex point -2 and -1 should be here, -2 and -1, and the y-intercept at 3, this is the y-intercept 3, then we can graph it. Or we can find the x-intercepts, by the way, from the equation y equals x squared plus 4x plus 4. We need to put it equals to 0 to find what? To find the value of x-intercepts. I'm sorry, plus 3, not plus 4. Then f of x equals 0 equals x squared plus 4x plus 3. Then we need to think about two numbers. If you make multiplication for these two numbers, the product should be 3. If you add them, the product should be 4. Think about it. 3 and 1, right?
Yeah.
Then the x-intercept should be -1 and -3. Then now we can graph our parabola. This is the vertex point, the intersection point at 3, and intersection point -1 with x-axis, and here the second leg or the second hand for the parabola. Is it hard? Yeah, Ala?
I understood it better now.
Okay. Let's move on and dealing with different concepts or different ideas for quadratic function. Let's go further in this topic and talk about different questions and different ideas. Could you please solve this question first of all? Quadratic 2x squared plus 8x minus 10. Find the axis of symmetry. Find the axis intercepts, which is y-intercepts and x-intercepts. Find the coordinates of the vertex and hence sketch the quadratic. Tell me about the axis of symmetry.
I haven't written it yet.
I'll tell you about the equation, which is x equals negative b over 2a, and then you need to substitute b equals 8 and a equals 2, right?
For the X-intercepts or for the axis of symmetry?
I'm talking about axis of symmetry. This is the rule for axis of symmetry, by the way. And this is the coordinate for the x coordinate in the vertex points.
I turned the function into vertex form, and then I was going to find the axis of symmetry.
Okay, don't worry. Another method, completely right. Continue, please, Yala. Thank you. But don't forget to take 2 as a common factor, because it will not work if you do or converting by completing the square as it is. You need to take 2 as a common factor first of all. I prefer to use it like it is without using like converting from the standard form into the vertex form. There is no need for that, Yala.
Yeah, I just got 2.
You got 2 as an axis of symmetry?
Yeah.
No, the axis of symmetry, not 2. Should be negative 2, not 2. Look. Here, x equals negative b over 2a. Then instead of b, I'll put 8. And instead of a, I'll put 2. 2 times 2 becomes 4. Negative 8 over 4 becomes negative 2. This is the axis of symmetry, negative 2. Find the coordinates of the vertex. We're going to substitute in the equation. And instead of each x, we're going to substitute by negative 2. Then y equals 2, negative 2 squared, plus 8 times negative 2 minus 10. It becomes 2 times 4 becomes 8, and 8 times negative 2 becomes negative 16, and here we have negative 10. Then in all, negative 16 and 8 becomes negative 8. Negative 8 with negative 10 becomes negative 18. Then negative 2 and negative 18 will represent the vertex points or the vertex point. And now he said find the axis intercepts. We know that the y-intercept equals negative 10 y-intercept, right? Equals negative 10 while x equals 0. Then it generated a point negative 0 and negative 10. This is the y-intercept. What about x-intercepts? We need to put y equals 0 in the equation. It becomes 2x squared plus 8x minus 10 equals to 0. We're going to divide the whole equation over 2. It becomes x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals to 0. Then we're going to think about 2 numbers. If you do multiplication for these 2 numbers, the result should be negative 5. If you add them, the result should be 4. For sure, should be 5 and negative 1, right?
Yeah.
And x plus 5 times x minus 1 will equals to 0. This is a normal factorization, by the way. Then whether x equals 1 or x equals negative 5 while y equals 0. Then we found 2 points, 1 and 0, and negative 5 and 0. Got the idea? Now,
Yes.
I'll mention the most important points, which is the vertex. I'm sorry about that, which is negative 2 and negative 18, and the y-intercept 0 and negative 10, and the x-intercept 1 and 0 and negative 5 and 0. Use these 4 points to graph the parabola. Let me write them again here. The 4 points should be negative 2 and negative 18, and this is represent the vertex, and y-intercept represented by 0 and negative 10, and the x-intercepts represented by 1 and 0 and negative 5 and 0. These points. These are the X-intercepts. And now we can graph the quadratic equation normally. Like now, we're gonna graph the Y-intercept and the Y-axis and X-axis, right? Then, like here we have -2, for example, -4, -6, -8, -10, and -12, and -14, and -15, I'm sorry, 16, and -18. And here we have 2, and 4, and 6, -2, and -4, and -6. Here we have 2 and 4. This is Y-axis, and this is X-axis. Then second point, or second step, represent and plot the points, -2 and -18. Here, -2 and -18. And Y-intercept, while X equals 0 and Y equals -10. The X-intercept 1 and 0 and -5 and 0. 1 and 0 here, and -5 and 0 here. Then this is the axis of symmetry. This is, I'm sorry about that. I did it again. This is the axis of symmetry, while X equals -2. While X equals -2. Yes. After that, we're gonna graph the quadratic equation, and it's concave up. Concave up, by the way, because the coefficient positive, not negative, it was 2x², right?
Yes.
And this is the parabola. Seems to be like that. I'm sorry about the graphing. It's not accurate, but seems to be like that. Sorry about that. Got the idea? Okay. Now we're gonna talk about the discriminant. We talked about the discriminant before, and we have 3 scenarios, 3 cases. First case, when we have 2 distinct X-intercepts or X values, while delta greater than 0, as this example here, delta, which is b² - 4ac, the result for this discriminant rule should greater than 0 to find X-intercepts, X different or 2 different points intersect with the X-axis. About the second rule, while discriminant b² - 4ac equals to 0, that's represent the quadratic or the parabola will touch only 1 point on X-axis. The third rule or the third scenario, while delta smaller than 0, which is in a negative, and that represents the parabola does not cut the X-axis at all. Then we have how many scenarios? 3 scenarios, okay? We have 3 scenarios. While delta greater than 0, we have 2 real routes. And while delta equals to 0, we have only 1 real route, or touch the X-axis only once. While delta smaller than 0, we will not have any real routes, or the curve does not cut the X-axis. And delta represented by a rule, a specific rule, which is b² - 4ac. You need to save this rule. b² - 4ac came from the standard form of the quadratic equation, ax² + bx + c. Got the idea? This is A, and this is B, and this is C. Got the idea? Okay. Now we need to solve this question. He said what? He said find the equation of the quadratic with the graph of -2 here and x equals 1 as the axis of symmetry and y-intercept represented by 16. Now we need to find the graph. I'm sorry, to find the equation. Here we have the first x-intercept, which is -2, right? And we have a point, which is 16, while x equals 0. And here we have a point, which is -2, while y equals 0. And axis of symmetry will be in the mid distance between this x-intercept and this x-intercept, right? Will be a bisector for these 2 points, right? And
Yes.
the distance from x equals 1 to x equals 2, the distance should be 1, 2, 3 distance, or 3 steps, right? Right, Ya'ala?
Yes.
Okay, then we're gonna count 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. Then 3 plus 1 generate 4, right? Right?
Yes.
Then now we know the 2 x-intercepts represented by -2 and 0 and 4 and 0. Using the x-intercept form, f of x equals a times x minus b times x minus q. And p and q will represent the x-intercepts. First one will be -2. Second one will be 4. Then we're gonna substitute in the equation f of x equals a, x -2 and negative becomes positive, and 4 and negative becomes negative. This is the first step. What about the value of a, the missing value? We're gonna substitute instead of y and x by 0 and 16, by 0 and 16.
16.
Yes. 16 instead of f of x or y, and 0 instead of a, then it becomes a, and here 2 times -4. Then it becomes 16 equals -4 and 2 becomes -8a, then divided by -8 divided by -8, then a should equals 16 over -8 becomes -2, right? Then f of x equals -2 times x plus 2 times x minus 4. And we can convert it into the standard form. X times x becomes x squared. X times -4 becomes -4x, like that. And 2 times x becomes 2x. And 2 times -4 becomes -8, right? Then
Yes.
it equals 2. Here, -4x and 2x becomes -2x. Then -2 times x squared becomes -2x squared. -2 times -2x becomes 4x. And -2 times -8 becomes 16. And this equation represent what? Represent the same parabola. -2x squared plus 4x plus 16. -2x squared plus 4x plus 16, right? 16 will represent the y-intercept, and negative will represent that the parabola concave down, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Now, please try to solve these 2 questions, please. First one, then end with the second question.